Occurred, the 1st of December 2022, 6 hours 20 minutes and 0 seconds. Local location, Charlestown, IN, USA. Location details, Heritage Place subdivision, residential area. Shape, orb. Duration, 2 to 3 minutes. Know of observers. 3 characteristics, lights on object, aura or haze around object. Bright object was seen arriving and silently hovering over neighbor's home before moving behind our house and lighting up a window. On the morning of Thursday, December 1st, 2022 at 6:18 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, taken from door camera, my wife, son, 16, and daughter, 12, went outside to wait for the school bus. My kids are picked up across the street from our home, and my wife was keeping watch over the kids until the bus arrives. I was indoors and still in bed, but awake. I heard them walk out and close the door, and our Arlo camera recorded the time as 6:17 when my daughter first walked out, 6:18 when my wife accompanied my son out the door. The bus arrived at 6:21 and my wife re-entered the house at that point. It was dark outside. The sun rises at 7:41 a.m. on December 1st Street. While my wife was outside, the window to my bedroom lit up very brightly, as if it was daylight outside. The whole room lit up despite the shades and curtain being closed. I was lying just 3 or 4 feet from the window and sat up in bed and took notice. This window faces directly west from a walkout basement. The street and our front door face east. The closest house to the west is roughly 427 feet away. I thought perhaps a transformer had caught fire or that some kind of space debris was burning up during re-entry and lit up the outside. However, I do not recall the second window in the room lighting up. It has a thicker curtain though and doesn't get as bright during the day. I sat up confused for a few seconds, listening for any kind of noise and debating whether to get up and look outside to identify the source of light. Within about 10 to 15 seconds and before I decided what to do, the light dimmed. I then shrugged it off as unusual since that had never happened before. The window is far enough from other houses and any streets that car headlights do not shine on it, and this was much brighter than car headlights unless maybe the car was parked right outside the window. Later in the day, I spoke to my wife and without telling her about the odd light coming through the window, I simply asked her if she noticed anything unusual outside that morning while waiting on the bus. To my astonishment, she said yes and began to describe an object hovering over our neighbor's house to the south of ours. Their house is roughly 45 feet from ours. She described seeing a dimly lit object moving quickly approach from the SSE at a low altitude and said she thought it to be a plane at first, but then took notice when it stopped over the neighbor's house and began to glow brightly. She said she stepped off the porch in the front of our house and was looking towards our neighbor's house and back in the south-southwest direction. She said the object hovered over their house for maybe 20 seconds and then moved towards the rear of our house. She said it was silent and that she couldn't make out the shape because it was glowing too brightly. She said she wasn't wearing her glasses and so even if she could see beyond the light she may not have been able to make out the shape in the dark. I asked her if she saw any blinking or colored lights and she said no. She said the light was so bright that had there been blinking lights, they might have been washed out in the glare. She said her initial reaction was that it must be some kind of police drone. She described the light as white and she said the object looked to her like a glowing orb. She recalls thinking that whatever it is must see her because the light was so bright. I asked her if she recalls the roof of the neighbor's house lighting up or anything else reflecting the light and she said she did not recall that detail. Without disclosing these details, I asked my daughter and son separately, who were across the street slightly to the northeast from our house and our neighbor's house, if they had noticed anything odd. My son indicated he had not noticed anything odd. However, my daughter said she noticed a large object in the sky in the direction of our neighbor's house. I asked her to draw the object, and she drew it on a napkin. She said it looked futuristic like a spaceship from Star Trek. She perceived it to be as large as a commercial airline and thought it was in the sky some distance behind and beyond the neighbor's house. I asked her about any sound and she said she heard no jet noise and no drone noises. I took her to the bus stop location and asked her to point where she saw it. She pointed to the same location that my wife had from our front sidewalk. When asked, my daughter indicated that she did not notice any blinking lights and she did not see it glowing brightly. She said she witnessed her mother step off the porch and look at something. I asked her if she saw any bright light over the house or any sort of spotlight shining back at her mother, and she said no. She insisted that she wasn't paying attention and had only glanced in that direction for a few seconds. I asked her a few times if she saw any means of propulsion like jet engines or propellers and she indicated she did not. I asked how she was able to see the object if she noticed no lights at all and she couldn't answer. There are street lamps near the bus stop and they may have provided some ambient illumination. She said that she thought it was a very strange looking jet that had two sets of wings that were the same width. She said one set was at what she believed was the rear of the object and the other set were closer to the front. She said they were not like the rear control surfaces on a jet because both sets of wings were the same size. I own a DJI Mavic 2 Platinum drone which was touted as an improved version with quieter motors and quieter propellers. My kids and wife are familiar with how it sounds and looks when it is operating. It is not silent at the altitudes they were suggesting this object hovered. They described the object in question as having no sound and both said they thought it was larger than a drone. Given that she was describing the object's appearance differently than my wife and because she said she thought it to be further in the distance, I used the Flight Radar 24 website to go back to 11:16 UTC and look for local air traffic from then until 11:21 UTC when the bus arrived and my wife entered the house. At 11:16 UTC, 6:16 AM Eastern Standard Time, a helicopter from Indiana University Health was traveling from the northwest to the southeast roughly 1.5 miles from us and was out of the area by 11:18 Coordinated Universal Time. A UPS jet was on flight radar at 11 hours 21 minutes and 43 seconds Coordinated Universal Time heading from the southeast towards the northwest, roughly along the same corridor as the helicopter, but in the opposite direction. It stayed to the south of our location and turned clockwise back to the south, likely on approach to the SDF airport. The Arlo camera video confirms this timing. My wife can be seen entering our house at 11:21 Coordinated Universal Time and afterwards you can hear the jet in the audio before the camera stops recording its 15-second clip. So it is my understanding this jet passed by after the object was sighted hovering and moving behind our house. There was no other nearby air traffic on flight radar during the 11:16 UTC to 11:21 UTC window. I did a video screen capture of flight radar to save the data since it is no longer available on flight radar with a free account after 7 days. Given that the object was witnessed moving by two people, I disregarded any notion that it was a planet, star, or meteorite, and as described by my wife and my experience with the bedroom window, it was too bright to be a satellite. I have made no conclusions as to what the object was, except that it was unusual and likely not an aircraft with a transponder. From rough triangulation of my daughter's vantage point with my wife's vantage point, I have concluded that it was almost certainly not in the distance as my daughter described. My wife's view would have been obscured had it been further away. I believe it was as my wife stated, hovering above the roof of our neighbor's house. She indicated it was perhaps 10 to 20 feet above their house. I did not report the object to the local police because my wife did not want the attention and I didn't personally witness it. She preferred to have privacy. I urged her to reconsider because if this was a drone, it was a highly unusual configuration and it was sighted around a bus stop at a strange time. I am concerned about anyone surveilling my children at this time of the morning in the dark. If we ever see the object again, I intend to report it to local authorities. I chose to report this sighting here because of the following attributes. It was seemingly silent operation at low altitude. It was intelligently controlled. It was intense blindingly bright white light scene, not typical equipment for consumer drones, described as glowing orb. There were no traditional blinking lights as required by the FAA were detected if a drone operation was at dark and out of line of sight, which violates FAA rules, without an exception being issued for nighttime operation. I experienced its light separately from their encounter outside, and it seemed as though it knew I was inside and intentionally lit up the window. My daughter and wife seemed to experience it differently, and my daughter noticed no spotlight shining at my wife or any intense glowing that my wife saw, perhaps due to their different vantage points or something on the roof blocking my daughter's view. So in conclusion, if it was a consumer drone, it was a very unusual custom configuration that makes no sound and is equipped with an illegal light. I also don't rule out the possibility of some type of police drone or military drone. Attached photo description. The attached drawing was made by my daughter to describe the shape she recalled. I added the propellers and dots on the wingtips in an attempt to ask her if she noticed propulsion or lights, and she said no. So those parts of the drawing were not part of the original drawing. They were added by me after the fact. She indicated the wings in front back were the same size and then added that the rear wings might have been slightly larger than the front wings. She did not witness the object banking and could not describe if it moved sideways.
Occurred, the 1st of July 1990, 22 hours 0 minutes and 0 seconds. Local location, Jeffersonville, N, USA. Shape, triangle. Duration, 10 minutes. No of observers. 2 triangular dark shape hovering above closed ammunition plant in southern Indiana. My mother and I were driving back home from Clarksville, Indiana. It was dark outside and the weather was warm and clear. We were driving northeast along a road that takes you past the Jeffersonville ammunitions plant. We both saw it at the same time. An object in the sky with no lights. It didn't appear to be moving. The object was hovering above one of the old closed-down factory sections. It wasn't really high, but it wasn't what I would call low either. I would saw that it was as high as a very tall radio tower, if that makes any sense. If I had to guess how big it was, I would have to compare it to jets I have seen at air shows at that altitude. I would say about the size of a B-1B. We approached it. It was off to the east of us. It never moved from the point in the sky. My mother slowed down and I stuck my head out the window for about 3 minutes. I never heard any noise coming from the object, and there were only a couple of cars in the area but not near us. The object was dark, not reflective that I saw. It was triangular in shape.